Don't pray to the gods who show up after dark. She was warned as a child. But on the eve of her wedding, desperate not to marry the man that she does not love, she trips out into the tangled weeds of a forest. And she stands there cold in her wedding gown, listening to the deadening silence, calling out to the darkness, and she begs it to save her. And then it answers. And she squints into the shadows between the trees, but there is no shape. There's no God to be found there. Only this voice, sharp and brittle as a stick, and it offers her immortality. She will never have to die, but the catch is that she will also never be recognized. No matter how many times someone sees her, it will always be a first time. Her dearest friends and family and community will have to learn who she is at their every meeting. She will always be a stranger to them and to others, no matter where she goes. She will belong nowhere. This is the beginning of the book called The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by Victoria Schwab, and it is a fantastic novel. In part, it is fantastic because I think of our lives as being the reverse of this. If Addie's life is immortal but invisible, our life is mortal and seen by others. Our lives are finite and they are deeply relational. I take this to be the smartness of the book. It links our belonging to others, our belonging to family and friends and community with our finitude, with our mortality. We always belong to this particular group of people, in this particular place, in this particular time. We cannot belong to every group of people in every place. Addie's life, in contrast, is embedded with no group of people, and she is free to be everywhere and nowhere at once. This juxtaposition between Addie's life and ours allows us to wonder which is preferable. Would we give up the web of our relationships for the lure of immortality? Would we give up our sense of belonging for the promise of infinite time? The characters in this book struggle with this question. They too try to wrestle with their finitude. One of the characters puts it this way: do you ever feel like you're running out of time? And I don't mean in that normal time flies kind of way. I mean feeling like time is surging by so fast that you try to reach out and grab it. You try to hold on, but it just keeps rushing away, slipping through your fingers. And every second, there's a little less of it, a little less air too. And sometimes when I'm sitting still, I start to think about it. And when I think about it, I just can't breathe. I have to get up. I have to move. Such mortal restlessness should be somewhat relatable to all of us. When life becomes too predictable, too routine, too stale, we start to wish for more. And that wishing for more is very much framed by our mortality. I take this to be the reason that people start to reevaluate things in midlife. We start to question decisions and priorities as time on earth begins to feel shorter. And it is also a phenomenon of later life, where we look backwards at roads that diverged and we regret the ones that were not taken, much like the ones depicted on the cover of the Order of Service today, two roads diverging in a yellow wood. Our hearts are pierceable. They are pierceable by regret. I think that the current term for this is FOMO. FOMO, which I really just learned about that term recently. Jonathan taught it to me. It stands for the fear of missing out. And this particular phenomenon is heightened, I think, by our social media age. It is so easy to view others gallivanting on fancy vacations and wolfing down exquisite meals and achieving their goals, and then start to wish that we were in their bodies and that we had their lives. In moments like that, our time on earth feels much too short, our relationships inadequate, our choices unsatisfying. I think that there is something very tender and human about that wish to have, to be, and to live into more. The Faustian whisper, the one that we hear in those moments, is that we do not have enough and that we should desire more, desire to be free, desire some radical novelty in our lives. As the writer Marcus Zusak calls it, he names it the sickness. He writes, and then there's the sickness that I feel from looking at legs that I cannot touch, or lips that do not smile at me, or hips that do not reach for me, and hearts that do not beat for me. And yet, there are good reasons to question this yearning for more, this mortal restlessness. And the person who has been helping me think about that recently is a psychologist and philosopher. His name is Sven Brinkman. And he wrote a book called, appropriately, The Joy of Missing Out. The Joy of Missing Out. In that book, he writes that our limitations provide us not simply with something that holds us back, but rather it provides us with a particular kind of freedom, a special capacity for freedom. And I think that that's a counterintuitive move that he is making, because many think that freedom means unruly wildness, that it is unconstrained choice. The fantasy of freedom is being able to wake up and choose something totally new every day, to choose it from just a sprawling buffet of options. But Brinkman pushes against this notion of freedom. He does not believe that the most exquisite kind of human freedom equates with unconstrained choice. Instead, he argues that true freedom flourishes in the making of a lifelong commitment or a project that requires incredible focus. There, we choose to create something that takes effort and intention. And in doing so, in nurturing a healthy relationship with another person, or learning to play a musical instrument, or caring about a particular social justice issue, we find a deeper joy. When a person does not have these commitments, when they flit from one choice to the next, they lose the capacity to find that deeper rooted joy. It becomes its own form of missing out. Brinkman calls it the tyranny of a formless life. The tyranny of a formless life. Not to choose, not to commit ourselves, not to invest in relationships and projects. That also is a choice. Life gives us no choice but to make a choice. And we must choose how we will spend our days, whether that is in relationships that we have invested in, or projects that we have committed our hearts to, or talents that we nurture. If we choose to be free from those commitments, we can do that too, but that too is a choice. And doing that may mean that we miss out on some of the most exquisite parts of life, those parts that require effort and intention and time. I think a story here may help. Lisa Gormson is a physician who walked into a patient's room. The machines softly beeped as the white fluorescent lights burned overhead. And she sat next to this patient dressed in a checkered hospital gown with a tangled braid of salt and pepper hair. The patient was somewhat foggy from the medication. She was in the palliative care ward, and she would slip in and out of chronic pain. And so the doctor came in to ask her how she was doing. Dr. Gormson asked the patient if there was anything that she was worried about. And the old lady said that what bothered her the most was actually not the pain. It was not the pain that she was experiencing there in the hospital. It was, instead, the fact that she had not been able to prune her roses. To prune her roses. Gormson noticed that the woman's fingernails were lined with dirt, and she imagined the old lady sinking her hands into the earth and trimming spiky leaves and caring for an ancient wooden trellis whose buds and beauty were now falling into disrepair. The roses were things that she cared about, that she spent time on, that she was committed to. She gave herself over to this beautiful thing that she found worth loving in her life. Soren Kierkegaard was another thinker who found freedom in the relationships and the efforts that we dedicate our lives to. In one of the books, he asks the question, what is it that we can learn from the lily and the bird? When we turn our attention away from the press of modern culture, what is it that these simple figures from nature, what is it that they can teach us? And the answer he gives is one that we might not expect. When I was first starting to read this passage from Kierkegaard, I thought that he would say something about beauty or appreciation. Instead, he said that the thing that we can learn from the lily and the bird is obedience. Obedience. On first read, that word sounds quaint, pious, and maybe even problematic. No, it definitely sounds problematic. Obedience is not a word that resonates for most Unitarian Universalists, and I would count myself as one of those. As gentle, loving, free thinkers, few of us are psyched to be told that we should obey. And of course, obedience has cruel associations, such as when one is told to obey an abusive parent or perhaps a tyrannical political figure. But that is not what Kierkegaard is talking about in this passage. The obedience that he sees in the lily and the bird is a sort of being at peace with circumstance. It is the obedience of not trying to be something different and other than who you are, not trying to have something that you do not have, not trying to love someone who does not love you back. It is finding glimmers of acceptance, peace, and accord with the way that things have turned out in your life. For the lily and the bird, there is no thought of being or doing anything other than being a lily or a bird. Kierkegaard sees their radical acceptance of circumstance as radically freeing. The paradox is that in accepting that obedience to circumstance, that obedience to the realities of our lives and the choices that we had made, the obedience to our relationships and our gifts, in it we can find a deeper freedom. It is a lightness in not trying to be something other, a joy in loving deeply the immediacy of what you have, a hope in investing your heart in the relationships that are most alive to you, a pleasure in the things that sustain your spirit, a sweetness in the taste and sound of the utterly ordinary, a freedom in the contours of the life that you have been given each day, a life that is pierced by beauty, a pleasure in the trellis of roses, the well-worn instrument, the grooves of the relationships that are most precious to you, a joy in obedience such that when the darkness whispers, which you know that it will at times, will you not forsake all that you love and know for something new, better, and different? You will reply no, and be certain that you are not missing out.